and me. We already spent time. So today we have a talk, or call it a presentation, by Dr. Peter Na, who is in the section of societies and cultures. He is a social scientist, specializing on environmental issues. I know he's done some work on sustainability, and he's done some work also, mostly on conservation. Today, he wants to talk about the conflicts that arise between pastoralists and farmers. And he's using Gushiegu, part of the northern region. Gushiegu Municipality is at the heart of the northern region, as a case in point. And I guess his discussion is that there have been many ways that with tribe or communities have tried to resolve conflicts over land, over grazing land, over water resources. And so I'll just give you to Dr. Peter Na to, elaborate on his presentation and issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you, Osman. Thank you, Asiatu, for organizing this for us. So my talk today is an institutional clash in natural resource management, focus on Gushiegu. This is a paper I'm developing for a conference, so I hope that insights here. So it's basically preliminary insights. It's part of the insights here are part of findings from a study that we've been conducting in the northern parts and also in the Gushiegu area, Bimbila area, and Donkokrom, and also the Takwa area on conflicts around natural resources. And I've been doing this research around Gushiegu with Dr. Lassan here. We've been doing this work, I think, for 2.5 years now. So there are a couple of other insights that we have, but this is just just a few of the insights that I want to share with you. So this is how I'll proceed. I'll highlight the framings of conflict causation. I mean, how causes of conflicts are framed in the literature. And I will explain how the solutions on the ground manifest. Then, based on our field work, I would explain 3 instances that demonstrate the additional insights I want to present here, which is a sort of a social missing link. The solutions that are in place to resolve conflicts in this area sort of lacks something like a social missing link. I'll explain in due course. Then I'll suggest some research implications, of research that I've been thinking about through this work. So basically, the work is talking about conflicts between pastoralists and crop farmers in Gushiegu. So the object, like I said, this is a paper. So the object of this paper is to explain the outcomes of conflict resolution approaches as institutional class. So I am conceptualizing the outcomes of the way efforts towards addressing the conflicts. I'm conceptualizing these efforts as institutional clash. And that's what I want to explicate today. So that's the object of my paper and my talk. If you do a bit of work on conflicts on natural resources, you come across a lot of documents, a lot of talk on conflicts between crop farming and pastoralism. And this is quite rampant, dominant across West Africa. Indeed, across Africa, in East Africa, it is there. But I'm talking about Ghana, and therefore I place it within the West Africa region. These conflicts between crop farmers and pastoralists usually attract three main approaches to solutions. In my view, in going through the literature and also understanding the mechanisms in place to address this. The first one is state intervention. So the states intervene in this conflict with a goal to resolve it. And the state uses force sometimes, and also encloses a place for either farmers or for cattle holders, cattle headers. So the state intervention is one of the approaches or the mechanisms that currently exist for addressing this conflict. Then I also noticed that there is local mediation efforts, but this is mainly internal, as I see, by customary and non-customary influences, like chiefs, like police heads, like security agencies at the local place, So this is quite localized, and it involves maybe very issues that can be addressed at that level. For instance, a cow has eaten a crop. Now we bring the two people together to find out, okay, what can we pay to the farmer? So just localized arrangement to resolve localized conflicts. Another approach I noticed is that there is a provision of pastoralist infrastructure and access rights. So this is more, this transcends the local areas. NGOs and development cooperation institutions trying to provide infrastructure for pastoralists. In a way, all of this in a way to support the resolution of conflicts. So what I'm saying, that conflict is very rife between farmers and pastoralists in West Africa. And these are some of the approaches I have identified in trying to resolve these conflicts. What I noticed is that these approaches to resolving the conflicts, they draw mainly from Malthusian perspectives. The fact that population growth and climate, and greed and excessive exploitation of resources are leading to conflicts. So these approaches I noticed draw from this new Malthusian inclination. And also I got some insights from literature. But also there is a lot of talk about political ecology to understand the conflicts, where various actors try to exert their power over resources, try to exert their power to extract their interest, and this creates conflicts. So these two bases, new Malthusian inclination and political economy, have really informed the approaches towards the solution to the conflicts. Indeed, the conflict itself, as you read the literature, you can see that they are also based on these perspectives. So I try to now look at the causal frame. I try to frame the way literature and the way things work on the field to cause conflicts, the way literature explains it, and also to frame the existing solutions in my own way. So this is my creation, actually. It is something that some concepts I've created. Of course, environmental security is something that is there already. So one of the
seems to see there's danger ahead.
So I framed the causes of the conflict between farming and herding, and also try to frame the approaches solutions within some concepts. So for the causes, mainly the causes are framed as issues of environmental security and climate change. The fact that, like I said, neo-Malthusian perspectives, inclination, the fact that climate change and increases in human and livestock population leads to pressure on available grazing fields and farmlands. And therefore land becomes scarce. Land becomes scarce. So scarcity becomes one of the main things that causes the conflicts. And therefore, scarcity leads to competition. This is what exists in the literature. Scarcity leads to climate change and population growth in both human and non-human animals. Livestock leads to land scarcity, and land scarcity leads to competition, and competition leads to conflicts. This is the dominant line of argument in the literature. Now, when it comes to the remedial frame, the mechanisms that are in place now to address this follow more or less directly from the causes, the way the causes are framed, in that the approaches now are quite environmentally focused. They focus on the land, sort of to protect the land, to make sure the land becomes accessible. So there are enclosures and evictions. The states have encloses spaces and evicts herders, sometimes farmers. There are mechanisms to define rights of pastoralists to land. And all these are aimed at protecting land for legitimate use. What is legitimate is quite contested in a way. So you can find some of these remedial mechanisms trying to make farming more legitimate than herding, and others make herding more legitimate than farming. So, but the basic line is that they all focus more on the land, protecting the land for use by a particular group, either farming or herding. Oh, again. I just. All right, so yeah, the framings of the solution is basically draws from the framing of the causes, and this focus more on the land. So these are some examples of literature you can find on this across West Africa. It shows that the issue transcends Ghana, Nigeria. It covers West Africa, like I said, other parts of Africa. Kusasi and Bukari have done a good amount of work on Ghana. Benjamin Sem is an authority, in Mali, in Cameroon, on Nigeria, Burkina Faso. All these literature speak about the framing as I've explained. In Mali, in the Sahel area, one dimension is that religion becomes one key dimension that mediates the conflict, either minimizes it or blows it up. Okay. So with this insight from the literature, I went to the field together initially with Osman, and later I went alone. So I posed this question on the field, understanding that the solutions have been more focused on the land. I posed the question of whether institutions that are in place to resolve the conflicts, whether they help social mobilization and holistic integrative solutions. So what I mean about social mobilization here is whether they actually, the solutions try to bring farmers and herders together to work together, themselves with the support of external resources, or it is just about focusing on the land, giving herders some land or farmers some land, or whether these mechanisms try to bring them together, more or less like what happens in local mediation. But because these conflicts, are quite widespread, whether, key institutions that I've mentioned, the states, civil society, whether they actually implement mechanisms that bring herders and farmers together, to mobilize themselves as a unique, as one group to solve their problems. So what I'm presenting actually insights from Gushiegu, and Gushiegu is in the northern region, as you can see on the map. It's a rural agro-pastoralist society, so it's basically agricultural. It has quite dry weather, about 5 to 6 months or so, but this is alternated with wet season, as we know. And there is intermittent conflicts. Sometimes these conflicts are largely controlled, but you can feel it that there's conflict there. We went to a lot of communities where there have been conflicts that have been deadly. And Osman was telling me recently, something just flared up again, in one of the communities. So conflicts are there. Sometimes they become latent a bit, but I can feel it, that there's a lot of conflict. I remember when I was doing fieldwork recently, I was just passing by, and then I asked some young, they were seated at a tree, and I just asked them, so why don't you pay the land people? Because they say you don't pay them. They say, what do you mean? They access our land for free, so why should you pay them? So you can see that there is some tension. There's some tension in the community between herding and farming. So like I said, this project that took us to Gushiegu is called the DSIP, Domestic Security Implication of Peacekeeping. So it's a qualitative research that Osman and I did, and it started in 2021. So that's about Gushiegu. I move on to findings. Now, this is my view based on the fieldwork in Gushiegu. This is my view of the causal framing as I've presented, the neo-Malthusian framing and the political ecology framing. So this is my view based on the insights I got from the field research. Now, scarcity puts forth, because the Malthusian perspective actually focuses on scarcity and competition and conflicts. So what I found was that scarcity puts forth the absolute idea that herders and crop farmers are passive agents. They cannot do anything at all about their land. So once there's scarcity, then there's scarcity. So it's this kind of idea puts forth this notion that herders and crop farmers are passive agents. There is conflict. Conflict is almost always an outcome of competition. That's my perception, drawing from fieldwork to negate the framing. So what I'm really saying here is that the framing points out this, but they don't exist so on the field. So there is conflict. Conflict is almost always an outcome of land scarcity. But on the field, competition sometimes leads to cooperation, as I found. And herders and farmers are not passive, like the Malthusian framework wants us to think. So the causal framework also suggests that competition between farmers and herders makes the idea or brings out the idea that herders have customary rights too, which is not the case. Because what I found is that to compete with somebody over something, then you should have right over that thing as well as a person for you to be able to compete in the first place. So once you don't have a right, then we may not call it competition. But that's what the new Malthusian perspective, the way the conflict is framed, that's what this brings out. In the field, competition may not be called competition in a way because farmers claim that pastoralists don't have customary right over land at all. So there's no competition at all. Something you don't have right over, you cannot compete over it with someone else. And also there's the negation of the idea that competition occurs all year round over land, competition over land. Like I found that during the dry season, for instance, there is land. Cattle can roam all over the place. Nobody bothers, during the dry season. Of course, people regulate them away, but cattle are a bit freer to roam during the dry season. So competition does not really occur all year round. It may not even be described as competition as a point. So these are insights from the field that sort of negates the new Malthusian perspective. So the author's view, my view, is that land scarcity is actually socially constructed, in that when people want to make land scarce, they can. If they want to make land available in abundance, they can. So it's actually socially constructed. Depends on how people mobilize themselves together. So the framings do not evoke the innovative capacities of farmers and pastoralists. The new Malthusian perspective does not encourage the innovative capacities of farmers and pastoralists to deal with the challenges that they face. And that's why the framing is heavy on land scarcity, competition, and conflicts. Now, I did another conceptual thinking about the remedial framing, as I pointed out. So a few things to negate the framing of the mechanisms in place to resolve the conflicts. As I mentioned, the framings, the mechanisms are focused on the land, how to protect land for a group of people. So my findings showed me that there is a social link that is missing. Social link where, like I mentioned, the issue is about, for the existing mechanisms, about getting land for farmers or herders, and that is it. There is no effort to bring or to pull them together to identify what kind of indigenous skills and knowledge they have about, for instance, nutritious grass that farmers can grow and sell to herders, or farmers can grow as part of their crops and allow, herders to feed the animals with. So there is no effort to bring farmers and herders together in a more social effort to group these people together. So there's a social link that is missing. And this negates the framing of the solutions that focus on land. So in Gushiegu, I have come to understand that the solutions are halfway understood, but the solutions focus on the land and not socially mobilizing. The social link that is missing between farmers and herders does not make peace difficult to achieve. It makes peace difficult because land may be provided, pastoralists or herders, but this may not be all the solution that people need. So it makes peace difficult. And the more important thing is that there is institutional clash. I defined this, I developed this concept in institutional clash, which I'll explain further. There is institutional clash that sustains tensions and conflicts. The mechanisms for solution in place have become an institutional clash that fuels further tension and conflicts. So socially focused solutions are missing. The solutions we have are more environmentally focused. The socially focused solutions are quite missing in the existing mechanisms to solve the problem. Land access through social mobilization is quite missing. And there's a feeling of isolation, separation, detachment, and encroachment, particularly among both. For example, farmers feel encroached. Farmers feel encroached upon. Their culture, their land, they feel encroached upon by a mechanism to solve the problem. Now, I will illustrate these feeling of a missing social link and also the feeling of detachment through 3 instances in Gushiegu. The first one is this. This picture is, I don't know if I have the permission to, but this picture is ours from our field. It's the military presence in Bimbala. Bimbala may not be, it's also in the northern region, may not be associated that much with, it's not too close to Gushiegu. But I took this picture, this is a military presence in the community for a different purpose, I think a chieftaincy conflict. But I took this picture to demonstrate that the state has used force to evict herders, Operation Cowleg, we all know, in the early 2000s. And now what the state is thinking about is putting up ranches, developing ranches, where places are enclosed for cattle herders. What this does, this approach by the state does is that it removes pastoralists from farmers. Pastoralists, they are removed away. Okay, you have a ranch or they are evicted. So there is no effort for the state that brings these people together. This is the state. This one. So in Gushiegu, the military is not there, but ranching is being planned there. Ranching is being planned there. So this picture demonstrates the role of the state in isolating pastoralists from farmers, not bringing them together. This other picture, I took it recently, about 2 months ago, in a community called Zori. It is a shed that is used by pastoralists to rest during their passage. So where this shed is located is a huge corridor of land that is set aside for only pastoralists. Farmers cannot enter this. Even when pastoralists pass down and they go back, the land is just there. I was told that the land is just there. I interacted with a Greek extension officer who handles this, and he gave me this. So, and people around. So actually, a few Fulani people are living there, 1 or 2. But it's a shed that demonstrates, a picture that demonstrates land that is reserved for pastoralists. Farmers have no access to this land. And so this encloses herders from farmers interference in code, because the farmers cannot enter there, and it encloses herders from the farmers. It also redistributes land from farmers to pastoralists, but the land originally, it belongs to the people of the place. But it's been taken by a civil society in collaboration with, I think, the World Bank, taken and demarcated clearly with pillars, taken from farmers, pillars, clearly pillared and given to pastoralists as their corridor. So this also separates farmers, separate herders from farmers, and is focused on the land, not to bring the people together. The third demonstration is, so the first is the state, the second is civil society and development cooperation, and the third is the scientific community. I found that the scientific community is implicit somehow in creating this encroachment, this separation, this detachment from each other. I exemplify the scientific community by the Forestry Services Division. So this is a forest area with water. So this is a protected forest reserve. And this reserve, this forest is protected to ostensibly to protect the water body, River Dakar. I didn't say the water body itself, but it's there to protect the headwaters where the water, River Dakar, flows from. But then it provides some access to herders, not farmers. Farmers cannot enter here. There's a community in this in this forest called Gushiegu. Osman and I have been there, and I've been there a couple of times. And there is so much agitation for part of this forest because it's right there. They are located right in the forest, but they cannot access it. Cannot access the forest. But cattle have access to the forest, not legally, but the Forestry Service Division officers claim that they cannot control the cattle. So during the wet season, when the cattle cannot go to the farm fields because farmers have planted their crops there, the cattle come to the forest reserve. So they come there, but farmers are not able to enter the forest to farm. This again, to me, redistributes land from farmers to herders, and it encloses herders from farmers. There is no interaction. Indeed, in Gushiegu, there's a lot of tension. You can feel a lot of acrimony, apprehension, between herders and farmers. The farmers in Gushiegu complain a lot that they cannot access the land, the forest, but herders have access to the land. So these three instances demonstrate how existing mechanisms meet the social link, which is bringing people together, drawing on their skills, their knowledge, and making them work together to achieve peace in the area. Locally, this picture demonstrates how a social mobilization effort can achieve peace. I took this picture about two months ago. As you can see, a middle part is quite sparse. This is a place where cattle are kept for a long time, and their feces now are collected for the farm. So the cattle belongs to someone else, and the farm itself belongs to someone else. But they have this kind of collaborative work to keep the cattle there for some time to generate a lot of dung, and this dung is used for the farm. And so it tells me that customarily, farmers and herders have an idea of mobilizing each other, through social interaction, through innovative ways of living together. But this is not the focus of the key players in conflict resolution: the state, the civil society, the scientific community, as I've explained about. Yeah. So now, so that is my finding, the missing social link. That's my finding, and it's an institutional clash because there's an imposition of institutions that are not customarily accepted. Customarily, farmers should have access to their land, but there's a different kind of positivist, objectivist institution that is imposed. That is imposed on existing institutions of customary land management. And that's where the clash comes from. So I have just, sorry, 2 minutes, some implications of this. So based on the field work, I experienced some implications of research. Now, the literature tells us about the conflict is about land scarcity, it's about competition. But on the field, this may not be just land scarcity and conflict, which means that perhaps researchers go to we go to the field with a problem that we have pre-created. For example, in all theses, and we see problem statement, sometimes even before we go to the field. So these problems we carry to the field and blinds us from what actually exists, from how people describe their own issues, their own circumstances. And therefore, it kept me thinking whether in all research, should we problematize an objective? You know, should we make an object a problem before we go to the field? Or the problems come from the field? Or the objective of research should be to make people's lives legible, visible, or to make people's lives intelligible, understood, that's understood by others, other than creating a problem that we are going to resolve, which may not exist as people experience. So this research implication kept me thinking about how social scientists will organize research society, whether we are able to bring out the context within which people live their lives. Some conclusions. This I've just said this already. Normative environmental institutions are imposed on social institutions of community assets. This is the institutional clash. You know, reconstitution of agricultural and land management is dualist. So there's a dualist institution that is placed on existing customary management of land, which is quite social. Everybody has access to land. But the dualist institution is where farmers are separated from herders. And this is carried out as purported solution to the problems. This dualist imposition on existing customary land system sort of fuels tensions and conflicts, and does not necessarily make the existing mechanisms achieve peace. You know, this dualist imposition that separates farmers and from herders, you know, sort of increases the tension in the community. Thank you so much. And these are the ideas I want to share with you.
Thank you, Dr. Anna, for the exciting thoughts. As we sat here listening to you, I was very excited at you trying to reconstruct, the conceptual frames around, what is responsible for the conflicts, especially those surrounding scarcity and other things. And then you've also mentioned generally the kind of prescriptions to prevent this, which do not go far because they don't include everybody else. So I always my time. Now it's time for us to interact generally with his presentation. But if I may take the advantage, of chairing this session, I just want to ask some two basic questions. The first is about this new frame that you're thinking to resolve conflicts. I'm wondering how it fits when you have two sets of people who do not have the same land rights. Yeah, for example, because we know, maybe you didn't clarify, but the pastoralists are mostly the Fulani herdsmen. And then the farmers are the community crop farmers, if I understood you. So generally in all these discourses that we've been listening to, especially from the field, people would stress, they don't want a researcher to mince words and think that the Dagomba, who are the indigenous there, can have equal land rights with Fulanis to start with. So first is how we can deal with this in this reconstructed model of trying to resolve conflicts. And the second leading to it is that the Fulani themselves are not the same. You have Fulani who have settled with the community for well over 80, 100 years or over, especially in northern Ghana. And they've been there and they are looking after cattle that belongs actually, most of it, to indigenes, as against the nomads, the people who are still practicing transhumance, moving along corridors depending on the season. So they move, and that's why we have them coming all the way to Agogo, which is actually even just like in the forest area. So my point is, and then also the government interventions like Operation Cowley, like Operation Camlife, those that have at some time been used, especially Operation Cowleg, to flash, that's the word they use, to be able to flash out these nomads who are not related to, you cannot pinpoint that at this point they are here. There are those who move around, and it's very difficult to control them. Apparently, that's why the military and police exercise was used. So I'm also wondering how we would deal with these two sets of pastoralists who are completely different. Yeah. So I think we can take some. Yeah, let's take some more and then you respond to it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nam, for this very interesting presentation. Mine is one of the methodological questions. In your conclusion, you made the point about the kind of questions we take to the field. Now, I'm curious, is it that other studies do not reflect what is on the ground, or yours is just an exception? Thank you very much.
So let him address this, and then we ask some more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this. And some of them I would honestly say things that I've not thought about, and it helps to think about them. But just a few words on the new frame, as Osman said, and how does it fit when people do not have the same right. I got the insight that, and this is quite debatable and controversial, that pastoralists are not interested in land per se. They're interested in grass and water. Grass and water. So property rights can be there, however it is. But any effort to provide grass and water could provide some meaningful solution. For instance, the picture I showed you about how local people, a farmer, a header cow is within a compound of a farmer. That header does not have the rights to the land. It has access right, but not ownership rights. But access rights means that they also have the field to graze, and they are there. That's enough for the Fulani. So some people told me that if we get grass elsewhere, why not? We are not interested in a particular land per se. So property rights can remain, but what efforts we can put in place is to how to draw, that's the concept of social mobilization, how to draw the innovative capacities of these people. I didn't ask much of this, but I tend to think that, for example, pastoralists have very innovative ideas about what grasses are quite innovative, are resistant, that we can harness and develop. Farmers have the same kind of mind, So something that brings them together and draw their innovative capacities could not infiltrate the property rights so much that would create problems, because local people will not relinquish their rights over land easily. And therefore, what is the solution? The solution is to look towards a more socially oriented frame. Of course, the frame that's trying to remodel property rights, it may be important, but what I'm saying is that if of course it's important, my views are just complementary. It may be important, but the social aspect that is forgotten completely is important. Pulling the capacities of people together to innovate within the existing land rights systems. This is my view about how the different rights can fit into this model of social mobilization. But it's a good question. We can talk about it more. The second one is about differentiated headers. There are different headers. I think that's where the state fails clearly. Once you go evicting all headers, you don't solve the problem. And that's where the state fails. And that's why I sort of try to negate the approach by the state that it separates Fulani from farmers, but also beyond that, it's even create problems for the Fulani themselves. So I'm not with a state solution. Even the ranching I know that creates just an environment for Fulani without any interaction with farmers. Its consequent environmental degradation in the ranch and all that are issues. So yeah, differentiated headers is an issue for the state to address if they want to keep pursuing the eviction, the force issue, And then yeah. Yes, and Dr. Arote, your question. Of course, mine cannot be an exception. Other research have shown that, for just an example, competition does not lead to conflicts necessarily. It leads to cooperation as well. But what I'm saying is that when you look at the literature dominantly, there is this Malthusian notion of land scarcity, competition, and conflict. It's dominant. If you look at the literature on pastoralist farming, farmers' conflicts. But from Gushiegu, perhaps I need to study other areas. From Gushiegu, you can show that this is not really the issue. Land scarcity is not really the issue. Like I mentioned, in a dry season, there is land. Cattle can roam everywhere. So where is the competition? Where is the scarcity in the dry season, per se? So perhaps there is another issue that is really the problem. And therefore, if we set a problem before we even know the field, then we may blind ourselves to what the context that people actually exist with. My students on Monday, there is an issue of, okay, this can be addressed by hypothesis. You set a hypothesis, it fits or it doesn't fit. It could be true, but hypothesis still has a mind of a problem and whether the problem exists or not. Beyond that, what else? What else exists? The hypothesis just says the problem exists or it doesn't exist. But what else exists? Hypothesis is not able to arrive at that. So what I'm saying is that, of course, other studies have found things that are very particular to a context. But the issue of problematizing things before we go to the field might not be applicable to all research to me. And there's something not conclusive for me now, but it's a revision of methodology that I've been thinking about.
Thank you. We have, I think we should read, we have a question from Professor Dumaku.
Okay, so let me read what she has here. I appreciate the nuance about grass and water. I understand from Steve Tune's work that Cote d'Ivoire has had a different approach to addressing these conflicts between pastoralists and herders. Do they understand this need for grass and water? Is that country still successful in this approach?
So we can take a couple more, like we did the first time, so that he would address the distance. And then also, so while we wait, I also wanted to, if we were asked to place some more emphasis on the way the state, regulates as well as, in conflict resolution, or conflict mitigation, who would you consider as, key stakeholders? If it's the state. Because I realized in your presentation, you called the Forestry Commission, you classify the Forestry Commission as part of the scientific community. I would also want clarity on that because I see them more as central, very basic to the states, with so much power over resources, in the Gushiegu area. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. My question is quite related to Dr. Alasson's. Considering that the state tries to intervene in certain ways, and then knowing that sometimes we regard some of these herders as foreigners, did you observe any biases in the ways that the interventions have been carried out? Thank you. Yeah, the interventions of the state.
Do we have any other question? Oh, okay, yeah, let's just take that so that you address it.
Thank you. I think it might be a little bit outside the boundaries of the research you've done. But I wanted to ask if you thought any of the parties you mentioned, or any of the stakeholders involved, had an active interest in maintaining the state of conflict, in keeping the conflict going.
Okay, so Peter, you can address this before we see whether you can take more.
Thank you, Osman. Professor Dumako, I appreciate this question. To be frank, I must say this is an insight you've given me to look out for, to study Ivorian situation and to know what new approaches they are adopting. But the tone or the structure of your question sounds like they are not focusing on property rights as a solution, defining property rights. I don't know, but it sounds to me that they have a new way of dealing with the issue that could be interesting, could be quite informative for me. So I haven't come across this, this approach, but this is useful for me at this stage to explore, and I appreciate this. Thank you. I'm sorry to disappoint you here. Not any answer, but yeah. So the key stakeholders, the states. Of course, the local state, the state at the local level, it's key. My work does not mention the Judicial Assembly, but all our rounds, the Judicial Assembly, the security apparatus in the district is very key. Yes, it's very key because this is a security issue. But beyond this security apparatus, which I did a blog about this in this project's website, that the security may provide security, thinking that is peace, but that is not, to me, that is not peace. When you provide security, that does not necessarily mean peace. So the state apparatus that provides security is like what they are doing. Evicting headers and enclosing headers may provide some security for farmers, but the peace is not attained. So the local level states could encompass the Forest Commission, of course, but of course they also constitute the scientific committee because they deal with science, the science of forestry and how it helps regenerate, resources for everybody. So is the local states. That is very important because they live with this people, they understand them. And beyond them is the ancillary state agencies and also the traditional authorities. They may not be classified as the states, but when you look at the security mechanism in the districts, the traditional authorities are key parts. In my blog, I stated that they are parts not because of the innovative ways they can address solution, but they are part as an after when the security apparatus makes a regulation, then the chiefs are asked to ensure that this regulation works. That's what I found, and I made a blog about it. They provide security, but not peace really. So the state apparatus at the local level it's key. The scientific community can be placed as the states. But also in the context of what I worked on, I placed them more as dealing with science. And science and technology is very key to resolve this problem. And the Forestry Commission has a very vital role to play. They have the capacity to develop nutritious plants. Why I keep wondering, why do we keep trees just standing there and you can access and the forest is just there? Is this sustainability just for the forests there? Of course, it's good to have plants, but if nutritious grass, for instance, are planted by some farmers in the forest and the cattle are able to go there without destroying the trees, why not? The cattle may not destroy the trees, but this is not being done. And the trees that are planted by the Forest Service Division is the teak tree. which have some economic value, but they are not indigenous trees that people can benefit from, fruits and but teak tree, I have a picture here. I can teak trees all over in the forests there. So I place them as a scientific committee because they have a key role to play to develop science and local technology to help resolve the problem. The next question is about biases in intervention of the state. Well, like Osman mentioned, amongst the headers, the state is unable to differentiate, the cows, which belongs to whom and so forth. So once it's their cows, then their cows, they must be evicted. So amongst the headers, I don't see any bias there. But of course, between the farmers and the headers, then it's of course it's obvious that the state is clearly biased against headers. They don't recognize their activity as an existential thing. They need to live and they need to. So how do we create conditions for them to also live, but not so much infringing on the rights of farmers? It's a social thing that transcends land rights, and that's where the bias comes in. If the bias is, let's flush them out and the problem is solved. The problem has not been resolved in this way. Yeah, but among the Fulani, I don't see the states being biased against, because they are not able to differentiate in any way. Active interest in maintaining the state of conflict. I must say I did not encounter this, but in the literature, those who adopt political ecology approach, of course, states clearly that chiefs are very much interested not in maintaining the state of the conflict, but in maintaining the cattle there, because they derive rents from the cattle. And this could be seen as a way of maintaining the conflict. They themselves don't like the conflict. They try to find a way, mediation, to keep the cattle, and they get to their community. They have to ask the chief for permission for water, for land, and they pay, sometimes with cattle or with money. So it's in the interest of the chief to maintain the transhumance of the, just that, yeah, they are also just interested in this, and many of them do not make the efforts to bring these people together. Thank you.
Yeah, just a point to, I'll read somebody's question, but just a point on what Dr. Na, the current discussion. But I think in our research, we have many pages, many transcripts from Donko Krum, from Dawa Dawa, from Gushiegu itself, even from Bembia, where the people thought that the security agencies have often been very heavy-handed. And that is because they gain from what is happening. For example, they kill cattle, and then they would divide the meat, or they would just, they said they would loot the booty. They would chance upon Fulani people and they would collect monies, and a lot of things happened during those operations. And these were even earlier operations before the Operation Calm Life one, So in a way, people complain that there are excesses because somebody else is benefiting. Even in Gushiegu, and Dagbon has had a long, extensive dispute. So there was the kind of respect that they used to accord the chiefs, paramount chiefs, village chiefs, reduced over the years. And so they said that the chiefs sometimes are just interested. It is the chiefs who would give the Fulani headsmen the right, to graze. And so sometimes when they destroy crops, you are afraid to send the matter to the chief, because if you do that, he would question your loyalty. How come he's given some people some right to graze and to have water, and tomorrow you are reporting them to the chief? I think that's why the police, everybody has problems with them. And we're not sure whether we should take it that they are doing their work well, because the community has problem with them. That when they bring them, even Operation Cowleg, they'll just go and take some of the booty, and then they disappear. It's not, persistent. And then also, our interview with the Fulani, herdsmen and communities in Gushiegu and Donkokrom, they will tell you that, the police come and say you are foreigners and you are doing this, and that they extort monies from them. So you would see that in many of the narratives, in a way, it's implied that somebody has an interest to see this. At least some people gain from this. And so in another way, logically, they would have an interest to see it progress. Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan, I think has posted his question instead of, yes. So I read it, it goes, beyond customary practices around resources, are there other unique practices of herders and farmers that can make social links stronger? Or Jonathan, if you want to explain it further, you can still raise up your hand and you have the platform to ask your question.
Hello.
He's trying to.
Okay, yeah, hello, can you hear me? I'm sorry,
So
okay.
we can't hear you. Are you on?
I'm sorry. Well, if you can hear me, all I'm trying to do with the question.
Hello, come again.
If you can hear me, what I'm trying to do is to open a different line of inquiry beyond the resources to find out what other social linkages that might exist that can help strengthen your finding on social links. Because what you have presented, they seem to be connected to resources. But beyond the resources, are there other interactions that can come together to make the social links that you have identified stronger?
Oh, thank you really for this question. It's very important. What I know is that there is very little interaction beyond mainly what I've described, other social interaction. For example, I didn't find something like intermarriages or events that people attend together. It's something that I could explore, but I did not find this. Talking to a few people, when you make jokes, people don't want to get close to having relationship or something with the Fulani farmers. Farmers don't want to have that anyway. And like I said, I chanced on this young people and I just stopped by and had interaction with them. Oh, but funny, I complain that you don't pay them. But what do you mean? They have access. So they have access to our land. What do you mean? Then they should just move on. So you can say that there's some sort of acrimony, deep acrimony that constrains other forms of social interaction, so to speak. I did not clearly find any, where the Fulani, the way they live, even on the farmer's compound, they are just within that compound. And the farmer may not even be close by, One allergy told me that one area that can be developed is this issue of alternative land access. Rainy season, farmers, herders they have access to part of land. Wet season, they have another part, access to farmers' land. It told me this is a way that can increase social interaction because they are within the same, but that's just that they try to allocate the land in a way that makes them cohabit, though the land rights is there. So other social forms of interaction, I'm not too sure I found any. Yeah, religion, Osman just.
No, I was, yeah, certainly. When the conflict between community people in Patinga, 2019, this was between the Gomez indigenous people there and settled Fulanis that have settled for several decades. And for a long time, nothing like that happened because they had social relations. A lot of them are Muslims, and that's a Muslim community. So yes, they said they were all shocked that a conflict could erupt and go to that extent because they pray together, they observe the same festivities and other things. And in Gushiegu, there are instances where the people say, that, sometimes they say they dampen their frustration because they are their fellow Muslim. So you can see that they have a fraternity that they work with. I think that's the first. The second also is the fact that the settled Fulanis are looking after the livestock of the community farmers or community people. Of course, the community man will tell you that the fact that I have a contract with a Fulani herder to look after my cattle doesn't mean that I bear responsibility if he sends them to the bush, decides to withdraw and go to do some other trade, and assigns just a little boy or the wife and the boy, and they are unable to control the cattle. I should be able to bear the responsibility. So yes, you can see that because they look after their cattle, in a way, they interact than other community members because they want to know the welfare of that. And then the religion. So those are the few things I think are beyond resources that binds them. But sometimes it's just not enough, I think.
Yeah, there is another question online, and this is from Dr. Siapa. And he says, how does the farmer-herder conflict affect those who are both animal owners and crop farmers? Or is it the case that people are exclusively animals or crop farmers? And yeah, we have another one from Dr. Lawe. And in some areas, the Fulani or herders take care of the cattle belonging to politicians and powerful local actors. I'm wondering whether this also happens in Gushiegu. And if it does, why do you think has hindered opportunities at the local level for social mobilization in finding a lasting solution to these conflicts? Yeah, so Dr. Lawe and Dr. Siapa, if you want to perhaps clarify further, you can still wave your hand and then you would have the platform. But at the moment,
Thank you. And yeah, this is the beauty of a seminar. In that I may not have all the responses, and if somebody has, like Osman did. So Osman, I'm sure you share perspectives on these two questions as well. Together, yes. So how does farmer-herder conflict affect farmers who own cattle? This is a very good question. What I noticed is that for those who own the cattle, they are very careful. They are very, very careful that their cattle stay within their land. And usually the farmers who own cattle at the same time, most of them don't have large cattle like, other people who just focus on herding. But it's clear in the field that these farmers, I spoke with some allergies who are farmers as well. They don't have much land, but they try their best to remain because they are the people. They own the land. And so they don't try to create problems for their own people. So they are very careful to keep their cattle. They have this neighborly relations. Okay, you ask for a way for cattle to go and drink water, and you come back to the compound. So farmers who own cattle at the same time, I found that they are not implicated so much in the conflicts like pastoralists who just herd cattle and farmers who are largely producing crops. Yeah. I believe Osman has other perspective, but for the politicians. Yeah, this is something that you're right, I've not thought about. What I can say is that yes, there are politicians who own cattle in the place, but of course they have the resources and they have the connections. So they are able to resolve some of these things easily. You know, politicians have access to the police officers, the district chief executives, you know, so you might not even, as a farmer, you might not even be able to, you know, raise an issue with these politicians, you know. That was my focus anyway. But of course, there are instances, you know, comments that politicians are quite powerful and you cannot even, when you send the thing to the police, they come quickly and the thing is resolved. You don't even know how it went resolved. Farmers lament, you know, they express these lamentations, sort of. So politicians, yes, people are there in the community who have interest. They are absentee pastoralists. And they have interest in pastoralism and they try to influence it with their power and their connections. Thank you.
Oh, okay, the issue of politicians, or just like Richmond, I think by the way we design the research and going, you know, you're asking those questions, you know, because sometimes you must know what questions you ask, but we hear it occasionally. The other one is about whether some people own cattle. I think for many people in Gushiegu in particular, they would have cattle of some kind, and then they are farmers or they are traders of a kind. And indeed, that is why Peter talked of a corridor. The corridor actually is a West Africa, is an ECOWAS policy. An ECOWAS policy that says that even the normals, when they come, because people are complaining about destruction. And the issue is that they are destroying crops because they have no passage, safety passage. That is the corridor to pass through. The irony is, like, for example, Ghana, we don't have originally designated corridors for our own cattle and our own, you know, pastoral practitioners. And yet we are supposed to provide this corridor for no matter the headers from, you know, Burkina Faso, northern Nigeria, and expect them to pass safely and be able to have access to grass, to water, and other things. So what they're doing in Gushiegu is partly as a result of those pressures where government just tries to do something. It might not work fully, but not to be seen as not encouraging that kind of thing. But more importantly, also, like they said, literally every household would have some animal and would have a farm. So that is also a compromise. It is something that culminates into why, even as somebody might be upset that a Fulani herdsman has led cattle to destroy their crop, they are also aware that if they take some stringent actions today, tomorrow they might also be called to do so if their cattle go to destroy, you know, someone's farms.
This one is a comment from Dr. Njiba, and she says, great presentation, Dr. Nana.
India. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Dr. Silva comes back. How does what is happening in the area relates to the tragedy of the commons?
Well, I don't align too much with this tragedy of the commons because, like I said, it assumes things normatively static without harnessing the capacity that people have to change their circumstances. So I don't think it reflects. Of course, it does where the social mobilization efforts are not being pursued. Then you can. I think authorities long ago, like Esther Bosworth and the rest, have come out to debunk this tragedy. That you know, if we are quite purposeful to develop capacities, we can change our circumstances. The difference here is that we own the change of our capacity, not, you know, adopting capacities that may not be ours and create inappropriate technologies and circumstances for us. But the difference is, harnessing our own indigenous knowledge and skills about how we manage our resources, develop our capacities. So I don't really align with this tragedy of the commons. And yeah, that's what I said from the beginning. I negate this new mode using perspective. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, at this point, have we addressed that? So at this point, we would want to thank Dr. Na for sharing with us, some of the highlights of an ongoing research, and which was quite exciting. And then we also want to thank, the audience, for asking questions that actually would shape and reshape, this research practice. I think it's been quite exciting. And at this point, we have spent time that we should on this. And so thanking Dr. Na and then the audience, as well as the organizers for yet another interesting seminar. I will then hand over to the moderator for.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you to Dr. Osman and thank you, Dr. Na. We hope to see you next time. Yeah. So next week we have another presentation that is coming from the Department of Philosophy. This will be given by Dr. Richmond Kwesi, and it is titled The Will to Success. So please make time to join us again here in-house and online. That will be better for you. Thank you and see you next week. Bye-bye.